All righty, we are set to go. Good morning to Mr. Ray and Mr. Shanahan. We are absolutely positively honored to have you here virtually at Westland North High School. And I'm going to spin things around real quick so the students can say good morning to you. So bear with me and see if I don't knock something down and shut something off inadvertently. So let me get volume turned up here. So spin on around here for you. So let's try it out. Go green! Go white! There we go. You don't hear that very often in Columbus, Ohio, Mr. Ray. So yes, how about that? How about that indeed? So at this time, I'm going to go ahead and mute my audio and mute my camera and turn things over. I'll listen to the questions the students have. And if they have any questions to any of the answers you provide, I'll type those in the chat or send those to you guys in an email later on. But we've got 25 questions. We do not expect that we're going to get through all 25 questions. So kind of pick and choose what you want to talk about. We know the social media one is definitely one they want to hear about indeed. So at this time, ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Mr. Ray and Mr. Shanahan.
Hello, everybody. Really glad you guys had enjoyed reading the book and Mr. Hartnell made it part of your education process. Let me add, first of all, you guys are really lucky to have such a good teacher. I think you already know that. I've really enjoyed getting to know Ben and very envious of the type of teacher you guys have. I was thinking a good place to start out here is to kind of remind you guys the contrast that segregation is recent history, not ancient history, as is sometimes perceived too much. And Jimmy Ray is a perfect example of that. He's still walking around. And Jimmy, why don't you start out reminding kids about that, what it was like when you left segregated Fayetteville, North Carolina, and arrived at Michigan State in 1964. And one of the first things you did was you got up for breakfast at the Kellogg Center. And for those who don't know, the Kellogg Center is like the center of the hotel restaurant management program at Michigan State. So it's a pretty famous place and a nice place to stop and have breakfast. And Jimmy took a few minutes to get oriented, right?
Yes, I did. Good morning to the class. I left North Carolina in 1964 from Fayetteville. I was raised under the restrictive Jim Crow laws, where we wasn't referred to as Black at that time. We were called Negroes. And we had segregated water fountains, white only and colored only, segregated theaters. You had to sit up in the balcony and you wasn't allowed to sit down in a restaurant. You had to go to the side or the back door to get food. I took a 36-hour train ride to Michigan State from the South, which was very segregated and had Jim Crow laws, which restricted Blacks. They wasn't called Blacks in 64, they were called Negroes. But the separation in Fayetteville was they had white only and colored only water fountains in the stores downtown. The theaters, you had to sit in the balcony, and the restaurants, you couldn't go inside and eat. You had to go around to the back and get the food. If you ordered something, pick it up at the back or the side window. So I was picked up at the Grand Trunk Railroad Station by Vince Carolot, the assistant coach at Michigan State, took me to the Kellogg Center, which Tom mentioned early on, was the hotel on campus where the practical application for the students in hotel restaurant management degrees were training. And I stayed in the hotel for the first time. And he told me to meet him downstairs for breakfast at about 9 o'clock. So I went down for breakfast, but I was reluctant to go inside the restaurant because in the South, you wasn't allowed to go inside. But the host came out and noticed me and said, you must be a recruit, and invited me in. And I went in and sat down. And the whole while I was sitting down, the anxiety was feeling because I was thought somebody's gonna come tap me on the shoulder and say, you're not allowed to be in here. You're not allowed to sit down. But fortunately, my anxiety was quelled when Vince showed up at about a little after 9 o'clock. And for breakfast, I had never ordered off a menu. And so I was looking at the menu and reading down the menu. And he just made a suggestion. He said, he knew I was struggling. So he said, most of the recruits order the blueberry pancakes when they're here. So I said, okay, I'll go with that. And that's how my introduction to Michigan State went. When I went there on a recruiting visit from the segregated South.
Okay, and there's a couple questions here. I'll kind of combine them into one. How did the students treat you, the white students at Michigan State? And then the white players welcome and work with black players, especially. And, we have to remember back in the 1960s, the stereotype was that a black guy could not play quarterback because he couldn't lead white players. And so a lot of those stereotypes and myths were smashed by Michigan State's 1960s teams.
Well, the first part of that question, from a student body standpoint, it was very receptive. We didn't have any problems integrating into the student population, and the classes. Though the classes were as large as my whole senior class, some of the classes was as large as my whole senior class at E. Smith High School in Fayetteville. But that integration into the classroom and the student body as a whole went seamless. We were told certain things that by Duffy and the coaching staff to be on the lookout for. But as far as football was concerned, when I went to college, freshmen weren't eligible to play. So all the freshmen did was practice. And it was my first time being in a huddle with white players, or even playing against or with white players. And that, because of the freshman coach, in my recollection, Bert Smith, he made that a seamless process because all of us were dreads at that time. We had no status as a freshman. You were looked at as just a player trying to make the varsity team the next year, and everybody got kicked in the rear the same as black or white. It didn't matter. So he called all of us a jackass.
Okay. Hey, let's move right into the social media because the kids are interested in that. Something totally foreign to us when we were their age. But they picked up from Ray of Light reading the book that Bubba Smith would have been a social media star. What do you think about that, Jimmy?
No doubt. Bubba was a large, gregarious individual that loved the limelight and attention. He did things that no normal human being would probably try, but Bubba wasn't normal. He was infectious, a lot of enthusiasm. He was hard not to like, and he was charming for his size. And if there had been social media back then, because he ended up being an actor after his football career out in Hollywood. If it had been social media during that time, he would have been the ringleader with Facebook, Twitter, all the other media outlets that exist. He would have been the star of the team at that.
I had my own way of tackling. I used to grab the whole backfield. Then I threw guys out until I found the one with the ball. When I started drinking beer, I did the same thing. And this is the one I'm holding on to. Light beer from Miller. It has a third less calories than a regular beer. It's less filling, and it tastes terrific, too. I also love the easy opening can.
Light beer from Miller. Everything you always wanted in a beer, and less.
Yeah, Ben, are the kids familiar with this Bubba in the Police Academy movies?
Yeah, a few have heard of the Police Academy movies, mainly from the standpoint that things detective, oh, my dad likes that, or my grandpa thought it was funny. So
Yeah.
I can't vouch the fact that many of them have seen him from those, but I'm certain they're able to pull up a video on it just like that and get familiar with him from his acting days.
Yeah. To follow up on that question, Jimmy, the kids also asked, how would Duffy have responded to social media? They want to know if he might have banned you guys from being on it.
Well, Bubba probably would have gotten us banned. I think Duffy would have been receptive to it, but Bubba probably would have overused it to the point, misused it to the point that Duffy would have restricted the use of it. I know he wouldn't have allowed any cell phones on the team bus or in the team meetings. I think because of his progressiveness, I think he would have waded into it cautiously, but he would have allowed us to screw it up, and Bubba would have certainly done that for us, and he would have been because we were the only team in the country because of Bubba. We had curfew the night before the game, and we had curfew the night after the game because of the fear that Bubba would get into some after the game, after a win, he would celebrate extensively and get into some mischief. And so to restrict that and make sure that nothing happened along that line, we had curfew before the game and curfew after the game on Saturday night.
I didn't know that. And similarly, name, image, and likeness is a big deal in college sports these days, and kids are learning about it. And I know from talking to you in the past, Jimmy, you've been in favor of athletes being allowed to make some money while they're playing in college. How do you think that would have gone over in the 60s, and what do you think about it today?
Well, I think they need to, I like the idea, but I think they need to put some put some boundaries on it. Had that have been in existence when we were in school, with the amount of games that we won and the popularity of Bubba Smith and George Webster and Clinton Jones and Gene Washington and Charlie Thornhill, those guys would have made a lot of money. And it wouldn't have been equitable, because there were guys that practiced against us, that prepared us for the game, that wouldn't have gotten that kind of NIL money. So I think they need to put some boundaries on it, but the way it's headed right now, I don't think there's any question that it's going to outlive itself.
Yeah. Okay. Another question here. How did you think college football integration was going to go? Because Michigan State, of course, was way ahead of every other school, and that's what you knew. But at other schools, of course, it was still segregated in the South. And other schools, they had limitations. They had unwritten quotas. They didn't want more than, say, a half dozen Black players. Although let me say that while we're here at a Columbus area high school, Ohio State was also very good. Ohio State had double-digit Black athletes. Not as many as Michigan State and Duffy Daugherty, but they did have double-digit Black athletes.
Well, at the time that I was playing, I was unaware of magnitude that we would have on the integration of college football. When I was playing quarterback at Michigan State, I was probably the only Division I Black playing positional quarterback in college football. I had no idea that what has happened in the landscape of college football today, particularly in the South. It's almost unusual to see a team, LSU and Alabama and Mississippi State, that don't have a Black quarterback. I mean, it's an exception for the schools in the South now, and they were the last to integrate, to break down the barriers and start integrating somewhere in the mid 70s or early 70s, about 5 or 6 years after we had played. But to say that I had any forethought of this taking place in college football, I don't think I would have ever dreamed of that.
Okay. And one of the questions here is, did you receive any threats, written or verbal? Now we know a guy like Jerry Levias at Southern Methodist down in Texas, he did receive death threats. I know Duffy Doherty, you can talk about this, received complaints from fans about playing a black quarterback. Not so sure how much it got back to you. I think Duffy showed you a lot of letters after you finished your career or something like that.
Yes, Duffy shielded just shielded me from that. Uh, I never received any overt threats from fans or from letters, and Duffy took all of that. Some people had written into him, written letters to him, some negative stuff about playing too many blacks. And you got to remember that in 1966, Michigan State was the first major college team to have two black co-captains, George Webster and Clinton Jones. It's never happened before or since, I don't think. Maybe since I'm sure, but it never happened before. So we were first in a lot of things. But Duffy went to great lengths and showed a lot of courage and conviction to allow me to play and to have the team select two black co-captains. But I didn't receive any bad quotes from people when I was playing quarterback at Michigan State.
Okay, good. Another question, I guess, would be talk about, because it wasn't automatic that you were going to play quarterback. You had to kind of work your way up to it. Talk about some of the frustrations and doubts about whether you would finally get that chance.
Well, that's very true. I left Fayetteville, North Carolina, hoping to have an opportunity to play quarterback. When I was being recruited by Michigan State, Duffy told my mom that I could be a quarterback as long as I wanted to be a quarterback. I didn't know at that time. I thought that sounded good, but I didn't know at that time that carried a lot of weight with it. I went through freshman football as a quarterback, as a starting quarterback, and I was voted the most outstanding freshman athlete, which gave me some impetus going into spring football into spring football practice. But when we got to spring football practice in my first year, I started off the freshman years as the ninth string quarterback. And when we got to spring, all of the guys that I had beaten out as freshmen were all ahead of me. And so I started out at number 9 again. I was all behind all those guys again. But as things progressed, they dropped off. And Steve Jude, who was a starting quarterback on the varsity the year before, was also a baseball player, and he's selected to play baseball in the spring. And so I had an opportunity to battle against a couple of guys, John Mullen and Larry Lukasik and Dave McCormick. And I stayed injury-free and I won out as a backup quarterback, I thought. And then we left for the summer and went home. And then we came back for the fall. And then the paper, Duffy said the backup spot was still being evaluated, that I didn't have a lock on it. So I thought, well, I got to go back through this again and hope, and maybe I'll have a chance to be the backup to Steve Jude. But it wasn't without a lot of trial and tribulation, I tell you that.
Okay. Of all the games you played in at Michigan State, which one is your favorite and why?
Well, my favorite game, the best game I ever played in college was against Ohio State in 1966 in a monsoon in Columbus. It rained. You really couldn't see to the sideline. It was raining so hard. And Woody Hayes that year had the license plates in Ohio changed to green and white because we had beat them the year before and held them to minus negative yardage total offense, rushing and passing. And he was determined that he wasn't going to let the team forget or the citizens of Ohio forget. And he made a statement that Jimmy Ray won't run that bootleg pass on us today. And, and we beat them. I think the score was 11-8.
11-8.
11-8. It was a hard fought contest. And ironically, we went in there ranked number 1 in the country. And we won the game 11-8 against a staunch opponent. And Notre Dame was number 2 in the country. And they played Duke, I think, and beat Duke 60-10. So the polls switched. That started the lead toward the controversy. The polls switched. We were 1 in one poll, and they were 1 in another poll. In the AP poll back then, they did it by UPI and AP and coaches poll, and we were 1 in some polls, and they were 1, and we were 2, and they were 2, and that led up to the final game of the year where we played for the national championship because of that weekend that in Ohio State. But as soon as that game was over in the rain, we knew Woody was going to wet the field down before the game, but we didn't anticipate a monsoon when we got down there. But as soon as the game was over and we came out of the locker room, the sun was shining just as bright, as clear as any lovely fall day you would see in Columbus. But that memory was the best game I played in college.
Yeah, Jimmy got a lot of praise from the Chicago Tribune writer for that game, as you guys would have read in Ray of Light. Talk about the game of the century. And another reason this game is significant, not only that it was 2 giant, great teams playing each other head to head at the end of the year, a quasi-national championship, but Michigan State was the future with 20 black players, 11 black starters, 2 black captains voted by the players, and the South's first black quarterback to win a national title, Jimmy Ray. Meanwhile, Notre Dame was the past. They only had 1 black player on the entire roster, Alan Page. So there was a huge contrast. And the dominoes kind of started to fall after that when other schools saw what Duffy Daugherty could do with a fully integrated roster, and they began to abandon their quotas, limiting it to single digits. But yeah, just talk about what a seminal moment that was in college football, Jimmy.
Well, during that time, we didn't have the national TV hookup like they do today. We were on national television maybe once a season, and that was either the Michigan game or the Notre Dame game. And so we played, and it's not like it is today. We played, and there wasn't a game of the week, a nationally televised game of the week, and a college game day. But the build up to the Michigan State Notre Dame national championship game was tremendous. I recall we had to be at the Kellogg Center at 6 o'clock for dinner. We had to check into the Kellogg Center at 6 o'clock for dinner. And so Bubba came by, called me and said, hey, Ray, let's I'm gonna pick you up. We're gonna go to the Kellogg Center. I said, okay. So Bubba had a brand new 66 white Riviera with a sunroof. Riviera, which was a Buick car, was white on white, in white, with his name in gold letters on the side. Not big, but where you open the door, had his name, Bubba, on the side of the car. And so rather than leave from the dorms where we were staying over on the west side of campus and go around the block and right down to Kellogg Center, he decided to take the drive all the way down to Hagedorn, which was the far end of campus, make the left turn up Grand River, which was the main street through campus. And as we got toward the district where the commercial stores were, Bubba was waving to all the fans. That was tons of people out on the sidewalks on that Friday, and we were taking a slow cruise, and Bubba was enjoying it and waving to the fans. And all of a sudden, a cop car pulls up behind us and stops us, and came over to the car, and Bubba said, "Do you know who I am?" And the police officer said, "Mr. Smith, I'm well aware of who you are, and you're under arrest." So Bubba had like $2,000 or $3,000 of outstanding parking tickets that he hadn't paid. And so they took us around the corner to the East Lansing police station, and they didn't handcuff him, but they had him in a holding cell. He told me to call Biggie. So I called, who was the athletic director at Michigan State. Biggie Munn, the former head coach, was then the athletic director. So I called Biggie Munn, and Biggie then called the chief of police at East Lansing, and got Bubba released. I guess guaranteed the payment of the tickets and got Bubba released. So we got in the car and we made it to the pregame. We made it to the dinner the night before dinner, just in time to beat the 6 o'clock curfew. But that was one of the highlights of the pregame festivities that went on. Yeah. And Bubba added to it with the fact that he paid his parking tickets.
Yeah, and that's another example of how the world has changed. Hardly any attention of it was given before the game. It was just kind of a story that came out later. But nowadays it would have been on the cable TV, Sports Center, ESPN, 24/7.
Yes, it would have been Michigan State All-American Bubba Smith arrested day before the game. It would have been given 24-hour coverage. Yeah.
One of the questions here is about your family coming to see you play, because you're a long way from home. Yeah, talk about that. I know your dad had a chance to talk to Duffy, and he really liked Duffy.
Yeah, my dad and the Parks and Recreation Director at Seabrook Park in Fayetteville. There was a black doctor in Fayetteville named Dr. I.C. Fowler, who had a relatively new, brand new car. And he would take my father and 3 other gentlemen. They would ride up from the South to East Lansing and watch me play. My mom was able to come a couple of times. The question was, how did it feel to have my parents there at the end of the game? It was a welcome, wholesome feeling, because normally when the game was over and the vastness of the campus, when the game was over, everybody dispersed and you went back to the dorms. It's a lonely walk back to the dorm. You didn't have any family there, and all the other players from the state of Michigan or from Ohio or around in the surrounding areas, all of their parents were there, or some of their family or friends of their family. So anytime my parents came, anytime any of us, when Willie Ray Smith came, Bubba's daddy, to see him and Gene play, we always had one of those kind of performances that you like to have, because of knowing that your parents were in the stands, and it was very rewarding, very gratifying. And
then, of course, nowadays kids communicate by text. Did you do something strange and foreign to them, like writing letters home to communicate with your parents? Or what did you
Yeah,
do?
I well, I sent postcards from the you could get postcards at the Kellogg Center. So they were a nickel, I think. And I sent my mom postcards. I wrote my mom and dad letters, and my girlfriend, I wrote her letters, and she wrote. We communicated by letter writing because back then you couldn't make a long distance phone call. We did have an outlet to make a long. What happened was Bubba discovered up in the press box that there was a phone you could call long distance on. So he was calling his girlfriend back in Beaumont and talking for hours. And I don't know if he called his parents, but he let a couple of the other guys in on it. I never got in it, but Duffy found out about it, and they had the phone taken out. You couldn't make a long distance phone call from your room. You could call campus, make campus calls.
Yeah, yeah. Kids today may not realize long distance phone calls were very expensive. I probably should have asked this question earlier. So they want to know who your favorite athletes were growing up, and who was your favorite athlete?
My favorite athlete growing up was the Big O, was Oscar Robinson, because he was the first Black guy that we saw play in the South. They had what they call in the basketball tournament during the holidays called the Dixie Classic, and they invited a team out of Cincinnati to come, and we had all heard about the Big O. Oscar Robinson. He went to Crispus Attucks High School in Minneapolis, Indiana, and he came to play in the District Classic, and they had two players assigned to just take fouls against him, but he still scored 30 points, got 30 rebounds, and had 10 assists. He was my favorite. That's the guy. Because I prided myself on being a basketball player in high school, so I kind of gravitated toward the Big O. I thought my future was in basketball until I saw him play, and then I realized I better get another occupation or try something else. But my favorite player today is Patrick Mahone, and I'm partial to the Kansas City Chiefs because I spent 14 years of my NFL coaching career with the Chiefs, and he's a player that I admire today.
Yeah. Talk about that. Excuse me. Seeing a Black face as an athlete was very important for you in the 60s. And as time moves on, it's important still for Black kids to see an African-American as a coach, as an executive in an office, teacher. That's one of the things that I learned from delving into researching all these subjects is just seeing a Black face gave a kid a lot of confidence that I can do this job too.
Well, yes, because role models are very important, and someone that looks like you doing something that's important or something that you might think is out of your realm or out of reach. That's what propelled me to Michigan State. I was sitting at home. I was a junior in high school, and the Rose Bowl game came on. And the players used to run up in front of the camera and announce their names and then go off, and then the next player would come up. And this Black guy came up from the University of Minnesota and said, "Sandy Stevens, quarterback, Uniontown, Pennsylvania," and took him. And so that was, I said, wow, because I didn't know that Blacks were playing quarterback at major colleges, because all I was around and had been exposed to was HBCUs, historical Black universities, and that's where most athletes in my school went. And so Sandy gave me the belief that I could go to a major college and even possibly even play quarterback. So to see now, you see the Tony Dungy's of the world, the Herman Edwards of the world, the all the black guys that have been given opportunities to become head coaches, Mike Tomlin, and the executives, the black general managers, Jerry Reese and Ozzie Newsome. That gives hope to the future of young kids that they can accomplish and do anything that they set their mind to, because they'll be given an opportunity. It won't be fair or easy, but it is an opportunity that is available to them.
Yeah, and that's a good time for me to point out that Tony Dungy, Pro Football Hall of Fame, first black coach to win a Super Bowl, he considers Jimmy a mentor. I'm often asked, how'd you get Tony Dungy to write the foreword for Ray of Light? And I said, easy, Jimmy asked him. So that's the respect Tony has for Jimmy. I guess we're coming up on 10:05 here, Ben. I'll ask a question, and if you need to jump on, let me know. But we should also talk about how Duffy gave both you and Sherman Lewis chances to coach at the college level, and then you both moved on to the NFL. You guys don't get the credit you deserve for clearing a path for future black coaches, but talk about that opportunity that Duffy gave you and how you and Sherman both took advantage of it.
Yeah, well, in my case, Sherman was ahead of me. He was an All-American at Michigan State in 1963 as a running back, and went on to play pro football and Canadian football, and then came back. And actually, Don Coleman was the first black assistant coach at Michigan State, and Sherman replaced him. I was playing pro football, was drafted by the Los Angeles Rams and was traded to the Philadelphia Eagles, and then was injured. And I had decided when I got injured, it ended my career. I went back to Michigan State to finish school and go to graduate school with the intentions of going to law school. I had no interest in coaching and never really even thought about it. And while I was going to graduate school, Duffy approached me. I was come out to watch practice sometimes, and he approached me and asked me if I would be interested in running the offensive opponent team against the defense. And I did that. I started doing that, and I liked it. And then he assigned me to become the advanced scout. I would go a week ahead of the team and scout the team's opponent for the next week. And I kind of liked it, but I had my mind set that I was going to go to law school, not thinking of coaching as a career. And then at the end of the year, just happenstance, George Perlis, the defensive line coach who eventually became head coach at Michigan State, was offered the defensive line job at the Pittsburgh Steelers. And Duffy had an opening on his staff. And he called me and asked me to come over to the Starboard Tack restaurant. I was about ready to go home for the Christmas holidays with my wife, Edwina. And he called me and said to come meet him over at the Starboard Tack, a restaurant just off campus in East Lansing. And I went in there, and he said, I'm going to make you a coach. I'm going to take George's salary, and I'm going to give half to you, and I'm going to give half to another graduate assistant named Herb Patera. And that's how my coaching career started. I mean, he always, Duffy was always very progressive. I don't know where I would be not for his courage and his conviction and his character. He started me in coaching, and he guided my coaching career all the way to the University of Texas. And then I was, when I left Michigan State, I was told him I was going to take a job. I had been in Michigan most of my playing career and my coaching career, and I was ready to get out of the snow and the cold. So I was offered a job at San Jose State, which I didn't know anything about. I just knew it was in California because we practiced at San Jose State when I played in the East-West Shrine game when I was a senior in college. And so I told him I was taking a job at San Jose State. And he said, no, you're not. You're going to Wyoming. And I said, Wyoming? And he said, yes, there's a young coach at Wyoming off of Darryl Rawls' staff at the University of Texas named Fred Akers. And he's an up and coming, he's going to be a guy, he's going to be a force in this coaching business. He said, that's where you're going. And so I went home and told my wife that Duffy said we ought to go to Wyoming. And that didn't go over well, but it was a very enjoyable experience when I went to Wyoming. I only stayed a year, but it propelled me.
Sorry, real quick, Mr. Ray, I'm going to go ahead. We're going to get the class dismissed, but before we do that, we'll get you another rousing send-off. So we know how to do this here. Here we go. Go Green! Go Green! All right, thank you guys very much.